Hello and welcome to episode 214 of Retro Encounter, RPG Fans' weekly podcast of many topics. I'm Mike Sollosi, and we're here with another topic, same as last week, but this time we are finishing off our discussion of Vagrant Story, and again I am joined by Joe Padilla.
Howdy.
So Joe, I have a confession to make, and this is not the fun kind of confession. I feel a little bad about this because this makes 3 games in a row for Retro Encounter where I've been unable to finish the game of the month in a appropriate/timely manner. I came pretty close with Trails of Cold Steel. I don't feel that bad about that one, but I wasn't able to finish Wild Arms in time or Vagrant Story in time with you, who I enjoy talking to very much. So I apologize in advance, Joe.
It's all good. Life happens.
Yeah, I had some life happening this month. Let me tell you, the past 2 weeks or so, I have had an eye injury, something called iritis, which I wasn't even aware existed until I had it, and ophthalmologists gave me special eye drops for it. But yeah, I haven't even been able to play to look at screens long enough to play very many video games the past week and a half, 2 weeks. So I binged a little bit on Pokemon when Pokemon Sword and Shield version came out a little while ago. But other than that, I barely made any progress on Vagrant Story. So I'm afraid I was unable to finish it for the podcast, and won't be able to speak about it with the level of expertise that you will. But I have zero fear about spoilers. We are going to spoil the entirety of Vagrant Story and have the best discussion we can. But I'm afraid you're going to have to carry the team Lamar Jackson style this time, Joe.
I will do my best with that. I don't know about expertise, but I will throw something together and do my best.
That is above and beyond what I'd like. So let's sort of figure out where we left off. Now, Joe, you were able to finish Vagrant Story, as you told me before the podcast, and you even posted a little bit about social media. We got some positive reactions when you were on the RPG Fan Twitter account. So there's at least some positive hype around Vagrant Story, or at least positive nostalgia. Was that your experience too, interacting on social media?
Yeah, we got a lot of traction when discussing Vagrant Story. I think it's kind of the RPG fan / retro encounter wheelhouse. This is the type of game that the people want to hear about. So.
From my observations, I think the games that listeners get the most excited about are PS1 and PS2, because I think the most likes and biggest reactions we've ever gotten on Facebook or Twitter were for the Xenogears podcast that we did in 2016.
Ooh.
And PS2 stuff rates very well. We got a bigger reaction than even I thought we would on for the Wild Arms 3 podcast last month. I always thought of that game, or I'm sorry, 2 months ago. I always thought of that game as sort of niche, a little bit like, not one of the Square Enix mainstream games, but we got a lot of people excited about it. I'm surprised that we couldn't recruit more people besides the two of us to play it for the podcast. But yeah, Vagrant Story is exactly in the wheelhouse of listeners, and there's a lot of interest in the game, even though it came out 19 or 20 years ago. But what was your overall impressions or feelings after completing it? Were you satisfied overall, or was there maybe too many frustrating parts? What are your feelings overall, like shortly after you beat it?
This is a sometimes extremely frustrating game, but at the end of it, with the final boss battle and the story having wrapped up, at least within the game, though there is a bit of a cliffhanger, I think it's kind of incredible. I think this is one of the most fascinating games I've played in terms of the ridiculous muddled complexity of its battle system to a really great story, which apparently Matsuno had to cut half of, and even that half that still exists is one of the best stories I've seen in a game thus far.
Right, and one thing that we talked about last week that maybe we should save this for later in the episode, but we were concerned, or at least I was concerned, that this game, which was very much about a small group of players, a small group of characters in this very specific setting of the city of Le Monde, we were worried that, or I was worried that it might spiral out of control and become the entire Earth is threatened kind of story, where I liked the claustrophobia and the intimacy of the setting and characters. Do you think, does it spiral out of control, or does it sort of stay grounded? I mean, as far as grounded as a JRPG of this era gets, which isn't very.
I would say that it does get a little, it does get a little Deus Ex Machina going on, but I think where some others kind of fail with that, I think it very much stays in the theming and the belief systems of the characters in the places the story goes.
Okay, so it maybe balloons a little bit, but not, but doesn't spiral out of control, and and you think it stays true to the characters and setting mostly. Is that a fair assessment on my part?
Correct.
Okay,
yes.
good. That's a bit of a relief to me, because if this game, ends up with one of the main characters basically turning into a giant purple demon and the entire world is suddenly threatened, I would have found that disappointing a little and eye rolling very, very much. But
there's a bit of one-winged angelness going on, but it's not.
Sure, I mean, if the final boss is a big transformed purple angel or one-winged angel or some other form of angel, I'm not bothered by that. But I would have been bothered if the stakes suddenly went from Le Monde to entire world in a matter of minutes. That's not what I wanted, and I don't think that's what we got. So where we left off. Ashley Riot is a risk breaker, which is like a form of secret agent almost from the local, well, not really local, like from the kingdom government, from like an operative of the Kingdom of Valendia, who's dispatched into Le Monde to try and shut down a hostage situation involving a duke named is it Barbaros or Barbados? I forget.
Is it Bardoba? Bardoba?
Yeah, Bardoba. That's it. I'm thinking of the Tales series with Barbados, so Duke Barboda is ostensibly the victim here, but we end up learning that he is actually one of the people bankrolling the cult, and the cult has a specific goal. The church has a specific goal and have dispatched a group of knights to try and stop it. To try and stop the cult, even if it means hostages are killed. And then there's also another person named the leader of the knights is named Guildenstern, and the leader of the cult is named Sydney. And then there's another character, Rosencrantz, who is another risk breaker like Ashley, our hero, who is entering this scene with unclear motives and unclear allegiances. Am I mostly okay so far?
Yes, I think Rosencrantz is no longer a risk breaker. I think he was formerly one.
He's formerly a risk breaker, but definitely knows more about the situation and Ashley himself than Ashley does.
Yes, yeah.
Right, and as we continue here with the story, Ashley's partner that's been assigned to him is kidnapped, and so Ashley's motivation is both the defuse the hostage situation, stop the cult, rescue his partner, and he encounters resistance from basically every other element here. Rosencrantz, Guildenstern, Sydney, monsters, and a vaguely defined forces of darkness, because there are monsters and undead and a lot of stuff going on in Le Monde. And I don't want to, you almost can make this Sex in the City or The Wire comment. The city is its own character in the story.
But it really is, though.
but in this case, I think it is, because it becomes clear that there are secrets underneath Le Monde, and and Le Monde is housing a vaguely defined power of darkness. Around when do the forces of darkness or the power of darkness become, or when is Ashley made aware of that part of Le Monde? Because I'd never really ran into that.
So he kind of becomes aware of that at a point with Sydney, because Sydney kind of explains a bit about the a bit about the world and such, and Guildenstern and Guildenstern's lover, whose name
Samantha.
Samantha, yes. So they kind of find these markings and discover the kind of truth of the city. It's very much I very much got the Full Metal Alchemist vibe of it, that the entire city is supposed to bring out the forces of darkness, as in Full Metal Alchemist, where it's like, oh, the whole city can be made into the Philosopher's Stone. So
Right, like the entire city is the alchemic circle that creates or seals off this power. I'm trying to think of a similar analogy, but my pop culture and literary knowledge is failing me right now. But like the entire city is the seal for this darkness, and it becomes very clear that basically every party other than Ashley himself is trying to find this power of darkness.
Mm-hmm.
But I think Sydney and the cult know the most about it. Like Sydney is very interested in informing Ashley about this. Like, and almost every encounter they have, Sydney is like taunting Ashley and telling him more about himself and more about the darkness in a way that he wants to almost like flirting is too strong a word, but Sydney is wanting to connect with Ashley, and definitely Guildenstern is more interested in killing Ashley.
Yeah, Sydney. It's interesting through the story how he kind of weaves in and out, because there's one boss fight where you actually fight alongside him. So that kind of throws your concept of Sydney out the window, because this entire time you're chasing the cultists. Sydney lost their all, and then there's this boss fight where you're actually fighting alongside him, and it seems that he is helping you to understand yourself and where you've come from.
Yeah, when I was playing the very beginning of the game, I thought Sydney was sort of a clear antagonist, but also figured, this guy's a smokescreen. This could be a situation like, I don't know, like so many RPGs, like the Last Story, or I don't know, even Final Fantasy Adventure 1 or Second Densetsu 1, where there's a clear early antagonist, but there's a ripe opportunity for another character to assume the mantle of main antagonist when something happens to the first target. And like Sydney is clearly connected to the darkness, but the whole time I'm thinking, oh man, either Rosencrantz or Guildenstern or even the Duke or the Cardinal will unexpectedly kill Sydney and then take his powers. I truly believed that after sort of most of the players had made an appearance.
Mm-hmm.
And that's almost exactly what happens, but Sydney sort of is a little bit more interesting than a regular antagonist, I think. It really felt like he was trying to draw Ashley in rather than try and stop at what Ashley was doing. Like this, the whole hostage situation maybe was trying to get the kingdom to dispatch Ashley and bring him to Sydney.
Yeah, it's Sydney. He's a very complicated character, and I can't quite get a beat on him as to.
We're dancing around it a little bit, but Sydney is also the illegitimate son of the Duke.
Yes.
And the Duke, who's been again has been supporting this cult from behind the scenes, and is collaborating with Sydney or cooperating with him on this stunt. It's unclear exactly what's going on. Sydney has a connection to the darkness. The Duke wants the power of darkness and is definitely using Sydney to get closer to it. But I'm not really sure what the point of this ploy was. I think that Sydney does want to bring Ashley to him. Was there another reason that they did this whole thing? Like, do they need all of this attention from the church and from the VKP, which is again like the the special agents of the kingdom. Do they need all of this attention drawn to Leomond? Like, what was the Duke trying? I get that the Duke wants the power of darkness, but what were they trying to accomplish with this whole hostage situation?
Well, part of it, and this is kind of fast forwarding, he wanted the power of the darkness, and and spoilers, that ends up with Ashley. But like, they wanted that power to be held by someone who they thought would be responsible with it. And so I'm wondering what exactly they mean by it. Do they mean someone who will be aware and respectful of the darkness that's within them and won't use that to evil means? Will it be someone that will carry out their wishes for power and a legacy that will last decades or hundreds of years? It's not entirely clear, I don't think, what exactly having Ashley be the bearer of darkness means.
My thought was that Sydney is a little insane and wants to give Ashley the power of darkness because he believes Ashley is destined for it, or Ashley is the true should be the true bearer of it. And then my other thought was that maybe if the VKP was aware of Ashley's potential to have the darkness, that Ashley, when Ashley becomes the bearer of darkness, he could be controlled. The people in the church and the Duke himself definitely want the power of darkness for selfish reasons, whether it's power or immortality. But again, that still makes me a little confused about Sydney, because Sydney is the vessel of darkness, but seems to want to give it to Ashley. At least I think. Did you get that feeling also?
Yeah, and he definitely did want to give that to Ashley, and it's almost like Sydney. Yeah, I'm kind of threading this now, but maybe because Sydney was this illegitimate child, and because of the circumstances that he was put in, this developing of his religious zealotry, he kind of has an inferiority complex in some way, that his power and his sway over the darkness is enough to take down the likes of Rosencrantz and others, but he believes Ashley to be the true heir, the masterpiece that it's seeking or something. And he's just one stop along the way.
Yeah, and Sydney also, he seems like he has a really rough upbringing. He was an illegitimate child of the Duke, and had some kind of illness or condition that caused him to lose limbs and have them replaced by some, I don't know, pretty hardcore looking metal replacement limbs. And I think that's probably also why Phantom Pain is a subtitle or alternative title of Vagrant Story. And Phantom Pain, Phantom Pain has shown up in a lot of different game subtitles and story names over the years.
Oh, you don't say.
Yeah, but Phantom Pain listeners, if you're in case for the uninitiated, Phantom Pain sometimes refers to a person who is missing, who's had a limb removed, but still feels the presence and pain in that limb, even though it no longer exists. It's a side effect of people who've had limbs amputated, often. And so that made me, and when I saw that Phantom Pain was like a subtitle of, or like Vagrant Story Part 1, The Phantom Pain, might refer to Sydney's missing limbs, but also might refer to Ashley's memories.
Yeah.
So
oh boy.
Yeah, so let's run it back a little bit. Ashley has memories of him killing his own family, or his family dying from an unknown assailant. But it's also unclear later on if these are Ashley's real memories or were implanted by the church or the VKP. Is that true-ish?
So it seems
I never saw this play out in game to an end.
Yeah, what it seems to be is that there were kind of one of two possibilities with this, and one of them is that his family was killed while he was having a picnic with them, and the other is that he, along with Rosencrantz, I believe, were risk breakers on a mission, and they just killed this family. But so, and throughout the story, at first you're like, oh, Ashley's out for revenge. He has lost his family. He was this family man who lost everything, and he's on this road to revenge. But then his repressed memories start coming back, and when it says that these were repressed memories, his skills that he's reacquiring, it's kind of saying he has quite a bit of training in some sort of mercenary or assassin skills, of course. And as it keeps going, it just really makes you question which one is the true memory. Is he this murderous, cold killer, or is he this family man? It's not really said for sure, because by the end of the game, I was convinced that I was playing as this murderer this entire game. But then before the second part of the final battle with Guildenstern, you see this family again reaching out to him. So was that fake? I don't know.
And it looks like that definitely Rosencrantz and maybe also Sydney are aware of the veracity of these memories within Ashley. Mm-hmm. So they're like, sometimes it feels like Rosencrantz is almost taunting him, or because Ashley is definitely having these memories repressed, whether they're his own or a family that he had to kill to so there could be no witnesses to some other act he did, and like it feels like Rosencrantz is taunting Ashley, and Ashley is remembering more of what happened every time he meets Rosencrantz. And possibly also Sydney has more of an idea of Ashley's past than Ashley himself does. It feels like another way that the VKP is trying to control Ashley. Because they definitely know more about what happened to Ashley's family than Ashley does. I'm certain that higher ups in the VKP know the truth of the matter about this. Mm-hmm. And they might have removed or repressed his memories or implanted them as a means of controlling him, because it feels like that these memories are, if anything, holding back a little bit. Like the previous version of Ashley was almost certainly more powerful and dangerous than the current level 1 Ashley that has difficulty killing lizard men if your elemental affinities are off.
In some cases, perhaps they didn't even need to implant this. It could be that his guilt from killing this family just caused him to repress a lot of this and to repress a lot of these.
And maybe even warp that memory to become his own family instead of a family he didn't know.
And perhaps, for all we know, both things are true. Maybe as a risk breaker, he had murdered an innocent family, and he had attempted to repress this side of him, started up his own, had his own family, and they were killed, and now this revenge plot is motivated by that.
The game doesn't feel like a revenge plot at the beginning, but with the introduction of these flashbacks, the player thinks, oh, maybe this is a revenge plot, or maybe this is just part of Ashley's past that is motivating him in the present. But it's unclear. The game is deliberately playing tricks on you, especially withholding the knowledge and motivations of Sydney, Rosencrantz, and Guildenstern. And one other thing, this is circling around a little bit, one other thing that you sort of learn more about as the game goes on is the Grand Grimoire, which is they know that to be something very powerful that many of these groups seem to be searching for. But really what the Grand Grimoire is the entire town of Leamonde itself, which is a, sealing off a vaguely defined powers of darkness. Mm-hmm. And also you meet a couple, those aren't the only characters in this game. We mentioned Samantha is Guildenstern's lover, but there's also Dwayne, Grissom, Tiger, and Nisa, who are the other knights in Guildenstern's unit. And I think basically all of them are boss fights at one point, is that right?
Yes, yeah, they're boss fights of some sort. Yeah.
And after you defeat one of them, I think it's the first one that Ashley encounters, comes back as a zombie corrupted by darkness, which startles the hell out of the other knights.
Yes, Grissom.
Grissom does, yeah. Okay. So you have this hint of a power of darkness hidden inside the city with people looking for it, and then you see the darkness manifest in some scary ways in, you know, some of the things that Sydney is capable of doing, and also creepy stuff like Grissom coming back as a zombie with two of the other knights sort of holding him back while Ashley escapes their custody and moves on. So like the game does a pretty good job of keeping players off balance, but also giving the player story breadcrumbs with these things like the Ashley's flashbacks and mysterious dialogue coming out of Rosencrantz and Sydney. Mm-hmm. But it sort of comes into a head with like the final encounter with Sydney, in which now I might get this mixed up a little bit. Sydney has darkness powers. Rosencrantz encounters him, and Rosencrantz believes he can handle the powers of darkness, but Sydney straight up kills him.
Yeah.
And then Ashley defeats Sydney, and shortly after like Sydney's defeat, Guildenstern sort of cuts in and rips the powers of darkness from Sydney and puts him into himself, and Guildenstern sort of becomes the host of the powers of darkness that everyone's searching for, and then kills the woman he loves because a sacrifice is required to fully unlock the powers. I thought that maybe Sydney capturing Ashley's companion at the beginning. Oh, I forget her name. What was it?
Callow.
Callow, yeah. I think that Sydney might have captured Callow, intending to use Callow as a sacrifice to give the powers to Ashley, but it never gets that far.
No, yeah, but everything you just ran down is basically correct.
Guildenstern is the surprise, not surprised final boss, because like again, I figured, okay, Sydney's a smokescreen. Someone else is going to take the powers and be the real final boss. I think I thought it was Rosencrantz from Rosencrantz's early introduction, but it ends up being Guildenstern. I had the wrong Hamlet character.
It does end up being Guildenstern. And first off, the last boss fight, it's a heck of a boss fight. It's a test of your reflexes, of your ability to chain commands, how you've built up Ashley to this point, your battle readiness. It is, I think it's an excellent boss fight.
Okay, but you also told me how frustrating it was before we recorded. It took you said, about 10 tries or more than 10 tries?
I mean, that boss fight in itself, I didn't find it terribly frustrating. I was like, okay, I think I'm learning something each time and getting a little bit better with my chaining and everything. That wasn't really the frustrating part. The frustrating part was the cathedral, the final dungeon.
Okay.
I mightily looked through a bit of a walkthrough and everything for it, because it is very confusing, very long, very tiring. And there's some really terrible block puzzles, which, objectively, the one thing that I will objectively say that I would absolutely take out of this game: no block puzzles. Block puzzles in this game, terrible. I don't understand I don't understand their purpose in the narrative or in Ashley's game mechanics. Just don't have them.
Sometimes I lament the lack of puzzles in modern RPGs, because it felt like something that was almost required in RPGs of the late 90s and early 2000s. Like, it would be, Dungeon Town puzzle sometimes. Mm-hmm. It would even be that, or maybe Dungeon Town puzzle boss, in some order. But sometimes we get to extremes. I mean, this year we've had episodes on Lufia 2, another game whose puzzles I think get too challenging. But when the puzzles get in the way of the story or in the way of the combat, and don't become a highlight of what you're there for the game.
Yeah, it really does become a big problem in the game in terms of the narrative moving forward, and just the mechanics don't work very well, and they're always block puzzles, which just aren't terribly interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not against block puzzles, but I'm against block puzzles where the third-person camera and third-person movement are, also not as good as you wish they were.
Hmm.
So, do you think this game needed fewer puzzles, or no puzzles, or just easier puzzles?
I'm not like a puzzle atheist or something. Like it's fine for a game to have puzzles, but if it's a narrative driven game and the block puzzles themselves don't fit into the narrative, there's no real, true reason for them being in this game. This isn't a Professor Layton game. Like there wasn't any, at least I didn't perceive any justification for them being in there. So
Yeah, especially if a puzzle is just unlocking the door to the next room and not doing something cool in the dungeon. Like,
mhm.
I find dungeon puzzles the most satisfying when they hit a level of Indiana Jones or Goonies nature, where solving a puzzle makes something happen in the dungeon that is cool to behold. These aren't those puzzles.
Yeah, no.
These are just slightly generic block pushing puzzles that don't that feel a little bit removed from the other parts of the game. I was following a guide when as far as I got in this game, so I didn't find the puzzles satisfying or interesting, and it seems like they didn't get better as the game goes along.
No, they just kind of get more frustrating and time consuming rather than giving you a sense of satisfaction. So,
And I mentioned a few seconds ago that I sometimes lament the lack of puzzles in more modern RPGs. When I played Tales of Vesperia again earlier this year for the podcast, that game has some okay puzzles. And like going through this game and solving a couple of puzzles and watching machinations happen in the dungeon made me think, oh yeah, I kind of miss this. I kind of miss having RPGs with a lot of puzzles in them. And then I got to playing this game the past month. I'm like, oh, maybe we don't need to go back to the heyday of puzzles. Like the puzzles can stay with the Zelda shrines of the world.
well, I've earlier this year I was playing through Silent Hill. Notable RPG, Silent Hill.
Oh yes.
And that game has some puzzles that I really like in there, where it's not taxing or frustrating movement wise, and it takes a bit of logic to figure them out.
Okay, a bit of logic. Some Silent Hill era puzzle logic is a little bit BS.
Yeah, sure. Some of them were a little bit BS, but I found some satisfaction in them. But I found no such satisfaction in Vagrant Story. So, and I felt like those fit in with the system that it had and the narrative. Like one puzzle that had you solving these kind of where you had to like insert these kind of cultish runes into doors and such. I mean that made sense. So
sure, I'm talking about like adventure game and horror game puzzles of that era nature, where you have to find a soap and a knife and an old key that doesn't fit, and then cup the soap into the shape of the key, and then that's the door. Like I don't know, puzzle logic from adventure games and horror games of the 90s and early 2000s is not something I have a lot of positive nostalgia for. And but I like a lot of puzzle games. Like I played Zero Escape Virtue's Last Reward earlier this year for the second time, and played Professor Layton and the Azran Legacy for the first time, also like in the first 2 months of the year. And both of those times I'm like, yeah, I want puzzles like this all the time. But then, doing the last couple dungeons of Trials of Mana when I played that twice over the summer, and puzzles in Vagrant Story, those kind of puzzles I could do without. I think the only reason I didn't find the Trials of Mana puzzles frustrating is because I had done them before 15 years ago, and I sort of half remembered them. So like going through the motions of doing a puzzle is fine, but actually trying to solve an obtuse puzzle sometimes feels pointless unless the reward is really good. Like in a game with good puzzles like Professor Layton, the entire world state changes with puzzles, and puzzles are really part of the game. But in a game like Vagrant Story, puzzles aren't really part of the game and just sort of get in the way a little bit. And I made that comparison both with the battle system and the puzzles in this game. But I want to go back to the final boss fight. You said that the cathedral was more frustrating than the fight against Guildenstern, but was the combat a problem against Guildenstern? You mentioned that you felt like you were learning even through failed encounters in this game, Dark Souls style almost. But was interacting with the battle system a problem with a few major boss battles in the second half of the game, or were you mostly taking care of yourself?
Um, hmm, towards the end of the game, the boss battles weren't as difficult because I had come to some understanding, some reckoning with the crafting system. It was more so just the navigation of the world that I had found a little bit difficult because while the map in the game is excellent, it's a really good map. The layout was still confusing enough, and I didn't um, remember exactly where some things had to be, and it was very long. So this is not the most eloquent way of saying that I wasn't a big fan of the cathedral, but that's the way the cookie crumbles.
All right, and let's go on to the ending of this game.
Oh boy.
After you defeat Guildenstern, Ashley is now sort of the the bearer of darkness. It looks like he escapes the city. Callow and even Sydney have survived this, but it's unclear whether everyone survives. You see Sydney visiting the Duke who's dying in his bed, and it's clear that Ashley is sort of now the vagrant or the wanderer, and was Sydney's plan from the beginning that Ashley take on the powers of darkness, and then the Duke kills Sydney, then dies himself in his bed. But then the VKP receive a message that the Duke was murdered, and Ashley is the suspected murderer. So I think it ends with almost every major player thrown into disarray. We don't know what happened to Callow and a few other people, but Sydney and the Duke and Rosencrantz and Guildenstern are all dead. Shout out Tom Stoppard. And Ashley has some incredible powers of darkness within himself, but he's a fugitive. Mm-hmm. Which gets me to a hypothetical question. You mentioned that this was intended part one of a two-part story. If a Vagrant Story 2 were to exist, say in 2020, what would it look like? Would it be a super-powered Ashley, on the run with all kinds of forces after him? Or would it be also set in a single city with Ashley trying to uncover some other mystery or secret with the darkness inside of him? And do you think it would retain this really convoluted, multi-layered battle system, or would it be simplified? Because sometimes streamlining is the choice in the 2010s.
I imagine it would have to be streamlined a little bit.
Right.
I mean, this would not stand in 2020. Like it just. Even now that we're in the age of all the Souls-like games and everything, this game still is too finicky with its crafting system to, I think, reach a wider audience. Now, just based on the actual act of combat and the chaining system and the reflexes required of that, I think that would go over fine. But it's just this, the tedium of crafting and understanding how these all work together. So I imagine in terms of story, I would like to see a part 2 of Vagrant Story that follows Callow as she's searching for Ashley, because she has that Heartseer ability.
There's that ability that manifests a couple times in the game where Ashley is able to see a memory or see something through the eyes of another person that gives him a clue of how to go forward.
Yeah, and so he has that ability, which kind of allows him to warg into people, and she has this ability to see the truth that they're hiding from her. So I would like to see her, at least in part of that hypothetical game, to see Ashley and converse with him and try to get to some of the bottom of what exactly it is that his past is and what he believes about himself, and whether that Heartseer ability, it can be kind of an unreliable narrator. You know, if something's a lie, but if Ashley's life is a lie, but it's a lie that he's told himself and repressed to the point of actually believing it about himself, what does she see through that?
Interesting. My perspective, I'm going to stick to a gameplay mechanics angle first, is that in very recent years we've had multiple Souls-like games, and also Monster Hunter World, which is, you know, a step above the previous Monster Hunter games in complexity and playability, and also the 2018 God of War. I think that a future Vagrant Story would be like one of those three games, a game that has complexity in its action by using almost every button, and giving you a lot of efficacy and a lot of options in how to approach something. Because, you know, in Vagrant Story you use multiple weapon types and multiple affinities and all kinds of systems layered onto each other, but just in a way that is a way that's streamlined and just more playable than this. Like, if they had a risk system, it would be very clearly communicated, and they would give you outs from the risk system that would leave you less vulnerable, and they would probably give you some kind of super-powered move that you could save up for, because it, like, sometimes Ashley feels a little bit too helpless, and if you make mistakes in combat, you'll almost play yourself into a corner that you can't escape from further in the encounter. You know where I'm coming from here?
Yeah, I could see that with it.
Yeah, but like, I think that a modern Vagrant Story sequel would avoid that feeling of helplessness at times in the combat system, but just sort of give you a lot of buttons and a lot of options that you see in modern action RPGs like Souls games or God of War, which is kind of an action RPG, or Monster Hunter, which is also kind of an action RPG, and all of those games have crafting. Crafting is just games with a lot of customization. There's a lot of the time there's crafting. It's Vagrant Story crafting in 2020 would resemble modern crafting and not old Vagrant Story crafting, which is for the best.
Yes.
But from a plot idea, I really like your theory. My first theory was just a wandering Ashley Riot on the run, but having like maybe the first 2/3 or first half of the game being Kalos searching for Ashley, and then the rest of the game them collaborating is a much more interesting angle. I like that a lot. The real question though is there, I mean, would they ever do a Vagrant Story 2 to finish the Ashley Riot story, which I think is a extremely unlikely proposition. There is not. This game is a cult favorite, and like we mentioned at the very beginning of the podcast, it does very well with our audience and in RPG fan circles. I mean, is there any fan outcry? Is there any demand for a Vagrant Story follow up? I mean, I'm thinking no. We don't really know what Matsuno is up to recently, but I'm pretty sure it isn't Vagrant Story 2.
Yeah, From what I've seen, and I don't want to make assumptions about this, but I've seen quite a bit that it seems that he might be kind of difficult to work with. I'm not sure what the truth of that is, how much of that is a history of Square trying to pivot from bad business decisions that they made that he hasn't been comfortable with, etc.
My suspicion is that Matsuno has difficulty executing upon his ambition. With apologies to Caitlin Argyros and other Final Fantasy XII fans out there, FF12 is a really cool RPG with a lot of big ideas that almost completely falls apart in the second half. The narrator the narrative drops off a cliff, and the second half is completely rushed, and some characters even feel thrown out as soon as they're introduced. And also we have it on pretty good authority that Vagrant Story was part one of like the first half of a fully intended story. So I think that Matsuno is really ambitious, is a great storyteller, but has problems staying within budget and problems executing on his complete story ideas. And that, especially if his games don't make a lot of money, that would really scare him away from a big publisher like Square Enix. So having him as a guest developer for things like one storyline and 3 raids in Final Fantasy XIV in 2017 is maybe an ideal use of his talents, and not having to. And they're probably, my guess is, Square Enix is unwilling to hang an entire game in his hands as executive producer anymore, but is okay, having him consult or assist on games from a safe distance. Is my feeling, but I don't have any real knowledge of this, of course.
Did you do that story beat in those raids in 14? I haven't played it, but I'm just kind of wondering if you still got it.
Well, okay, I'm on break from Final Fantasy XIV right now. I played through a lot of the story in 2019, including the first quarter or first third of Shadowbringers, which was amazing. But I was having PC issues and decided to take a break in September of this year. I stopped playing it for a while, and the Matsuno story section is the Alliance raid at level 70. So it was introduced in 2017 and 2018 in 3 different patches. Basically, one pretty sizable side quest that is not a requirement, but strongly encouraged if you wanted to do the end game level stuff at level 70. That involves Final Fantasy Tactics and Final Fantasy XII story beats, going through settings from both of those games, and even having an alternate universe version of Ramza and Alma and several other characters from Final Fantasy Tactics as major players.
Nice.
And it also takes the Final Fantasy Tactics angle of there's sort of an ancient legend, and there was one person that sort of believed in it or recorded it, and you have to sort of uncover what happened. I'm dancing around how it really goes, but it's a good story, and you can definitely see Matsuno's fingerprints all over it, and not just in the musical and visual choices that they make. And if you're a Final Fantasy 14 player who is at level 70, I strongly encourage it. It's really, really moderately challenging raids that have some really fascinating design choices. There's one boss fight where you have to sort of do algebra, where you're given a sort of simple equation shown by the boss, and you have to stand in a certain place based on the results of the equation, and you will basically. When you play that boss fight, you will very quickly understand how terrible most people are at math. But I could talk about Final Fantasy XIV for an entire podcast episode. And I'm a little shocked we haven't yet. But yeah,
it's just like the arithmetician.
A little bit, yeah. The arithmetician / calculator job from Final Fantasy Tactics, depending which translation you're playing. But yeah, I think that Square Enix does not want to have Matsuno in charge of a full game anymore, because there were sort of development time and budget problems surrounding his games, especially Final Fantasy XII, and there wasn't any Vagrant Story stuff in the Evil East raids in Final Fantasy XIV, although I would have welcomed it, or at least I didn't notice any. But I think that we're not going to get a Vagrant Story 2 because Matsuno can be a bit of a troublemaker, and also because I don't think there's really demand for it, even though Matsuno is definitely respected as a storyteller and developer. That FF14 raid is really good.
Yeah, and part of this is that I think that Matsuno brings up concepts and characters that I don't normally see in most games, and especially kind of within the Square Enix sphere.
And want to allow me to make another ridiculous Matsuno comparison. What's another developer that you know that is a bit of a problem child to his main developer and often goes over budget? And
who would that be?
Oh yeah, you see where I'm going. And also often has very high concept ideas in his games, but are bogged down with a multitude of systems, but have very sophisticated storytelling and camera work and other elements.
Mm-hmm. I wonder who that could be.
So my real question is Vagrant Story a Strand game? Yeah, like when I was thinking about what Vagrant Story is like, and how it feels like Metal Gear Solid 1 at times, and how Matsuno, you can make a few surface BS comparisons to Hideo Kojima, just comparing them as developers is, possible. I'm not trying to make an important point here, but I think that the reason we aren't seeing any more Matsuno games or any more new Matsuno games from Square Enix is maybe a similar reason why Hideo Kojima and Konami aren't on the best of terms.
Yeah, I feel like they'd probably have a lot to talk about if Matsuno and Kojima were ever in the same room.
The real solution to this conundrum is have Square Enix invite Hideo Kojima to design a Final Fantasy XIV dungeon.
Now there's an idea.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay. I mean, there's only a few degrees of separation here. I mean, Snake is in Smash, Cloud's in Smash. Like there's something there.
Monster Hunter is in Smash, and Monster Hunter is in FF14.
Okay.
Right. So it's a circle of life.
Yeah. One thing I have to bring up because I was so fascinated by it, as we said, we're jumping around a lot. Guildenstern. Mm-hmm. And what he's doing. I was really fascinated with Guildenstern. The boss fight itself I thought was excellent, but Guildenstern's motivations I thought were very interesting because I don't tend to make vague my politics or anything like that. But
so is his motivation just upending the government and social structure of Valendia?
Well, that's the thing is that he has this quote that he says towards the end to Sydney that I really liked. If you would allow me the indulgence, where Sydney kind of accuses him, kind of funnily, of being stuck on religious dogma, and he says, "Not religion, Sydney, revolution, a fresh wind to blow away the disease of the land, for our realm is sick, it suffocates with profiteers." And then he goes on about how the merchants only serve the ruling class and stuff like that. Now, it sounds very, kind of, revolutionary in the traditional sense, but it's not quite that, because he's so stuck on the ideas of legality and laws that it's really just, it's like he thinks he's this looking out for the common person, Marxist revolutionary, but he's actually just very he's very by the numbers legalist, and he just wants to see laws in place that are completely inflexible and that give him a sense of understanding the world around him.
And well, if he wants the powers of darkness to shape this new world, that almost makes him a wannabe fascist or a wannabe despot.
Yeah. Exactly.
So he does not want a revolution going into anarchy and then true freedom emerging from anarchy. He wants to reshape the world as he sees fit, which just makes him an opportunist, seeking power to shape the world on his whims. I mean, it's almost like he's a more boring RPG villain disguised as a revolutionary.
Yeah, he's a complete egotist because he wants these laws in place, but he doesn't want democracy at all. And if he has these laws in place, but he's the one who the laws are based on and what he believes to be objective, he's already put himself above the law. So his entire ideology is extremely flawed, but he still presses on forward with that and does everything in his power to achieve that future that he wants. And he doesn't even see how funny it all is.
So then, putting this in terms of a D&D alignment chart, he enters stage appearing like as a lawful good, and then it becomes clear that he thinks he's chaotic good or chaotic neutral. What he really wants to be is lawful evil, but really he's more neutral evil.
Yeah, I think to him he probably sees himself as true neutral. Like he probably sees himself a bit like Two-Face from Batman, a person who flips a coin and just leaves everything, what he thinks to be out of his own hands and into the hands of a perfect legal system. He doesn't see how that can exist.
Well, yeah, but Two-Face came from the law. I mean, Harvey Dent was a lawyer, and and had an obsession with justice and fairness, which led him to believe that the only really just way of ruling was pure chance. Mm-hmm. So that's almost like a lawful neutral disguised as a chaotic neutral. I'm not sure. I'm not a D&D player, even though I am a bit of a Square Enix and Batman scholar. Although the two spheres in that Venn diagram are barely touching each other.
Yeah.
Okay, if we're talking about Batman villains and D&D alignment charts, it might be near the end of the episode. Thank you so much, Joe, for discussing with me and for doing what I failed to do and playing through the entirety of Vagrant Story. I hope it was interesting or illuminating for you, because I know that I don't mean to throw shade on you by saying this, but a lot of RPGs of the 90s and early 2000s are new to you. You don't have the decades of playing these games as they were new as I did. But I hope this was a positive new bullet point in your RPG resume.
Definitely, yeah. I would say it's one of my favorites that I've played so far. Yeah, it's great.
I'm sure you say that to all the RPGs.
No, I don't say that about Wild Arms.
Oh. It's all right. I did enjoy most of Wild Arms 3. It just ended up being too much for me. But this game was also too much for me, but not because of the vastness of Wild Arms, more just the more for its individual pace and how do I say this? Wild Arms 3 was a game dense with content, and Vagrant Story was a game dense with systems, and I found that density held me back in both situations.
That's fair. And
the other game I failed to finish quite on time, even though I did finish it later that day. Trails of Cold Steel. That game was dense, more by just over. It was dense, kind of like Wild Arms 3 was dense, but I thought it was more compelling than either game in terms of story and characters and mechanics. So I was able to finish that one eventually. Speaking of games that I should be playing for the podcast, hopefully I'll finish 1 out of 4 over the second half of 2019. In December, we are doing 2 episodes on Ghost Trick Phantom Detective, an old favorite of mine from the early 2010s. And I'm really excited to replay that. I played that game once, right when it came out, and was completely captivated, and never replayed it, possibly out of fear that I might notice the flaws more, possibly, but more likely I just didn't have time or the inclination to. So I'm really looking forward to playing that and discussing it on a podcast in a few weeks in December. But before that, we have another very special episode that I've been preparing for quite a lot, actually. Next week, we're going to have a second quiz show episode. 4 RPG fan staff people are going to be answering quiz questions written by me. I'm hesitating a little bit because of the nature of these questions, but it's going to be very similar to the quiz show episode from May of this year, but there was enough interest both from the audience and from RPG fan staff to run another one, and it was a lot of fun doing that first one, so a second one is coming next week. We've recorded part of it, and all of the questions are written, but I still have to record the last part, so I don't know exactly how it goes, Joe. We're talking in the future tense a little bit. We're going to record that just a few days after we're done recording this. The quiz show episodes are really fun, and if you have any love of RPG trivia or quiz games, I strongly recommend listening to both episodes, the one from May and the one that comes next week. But in addition to that, we are going to do our regular year in review episode at the end of December, and I am 95% sure that the game after Ghost Trick is going to be Suikoden 5, which is a game that won a listener poll surrounding episode 200 a few months ago. And the promise was the winner of that poll would be a future Retro Encounter game within a few months, and we are sticking to that promise. Suikoden 5 is definitely going to be early 2020. I think January of 2020. Mm-hmm. So, but I can't 100% say that, but I'm pretty sure that is when Suikoden 5 is going to happen. But okay, let's step out of Retro Encounter's realm a little bit. Retro Encounter is part of the RPGFan.com podcasting family. We also have Random Encounter, which focuses on randomness and current events. Rhythm Encounter, which is a music podcast that has not had an episode in a few years, but may yet come back. And also Phoenix Edge, a podcast that is a recent addition to the RPG Fan podcast family and also mostly focuses on current events and is hosted live on YouTube every week. You can review all 4 of these podcasts, especially Retro Encounter, on iTunes or Google Play or however you are listening to us. We love feedback. And back to the RPGFan.com section of things. You can comment on RPG Fans boards, visit the Facebook page, visit Instagram, Twitter, our Discord server, our Twitch channel, something streaming every day on that Twitch channel. And Joe, as part of the social media team on RPGFan.com, you are often, performing some of those interactions on Facebook or Twitter.
Yeah, definitely. I am out there trying to get y'all to talk about games or make you laugh or make you mad at my bad takes. So, any news is good news. So keep it coming and yell at me. I just posted something about how Lightning Returns has great fashion. So if you think the Dress Sphere system is garbage, let me know. But don't.
Well, Dress Spheres is 10-2, not Lightning Returns.
Well, it's like a corruption on the Dress Sphere.
Oh, okay. So Lightning Returns brings back Dress Spheres in a way that I wasn't totally aware of.
It's not explicitly called the Dress Sphere, but you're dressing up Lightning in all these costumes that give her different attributes and jobs and stuff. So, with
apologies to my dear friend Peter Triesenberg, I have not played 30 minutes of the entire Final Fantasy XIII trilogy. Do you think that's something that I should try? Should we have a Retro Encounter 2020 episode on Final Fantasy XIII? Because it's on the Google Doc, and Peter is 100% the person who wrote it on the Google Doc.
See, so I would totally be a part of that. Final Fantasy XIII is a game that I have tried to play 3 different times, that I've owned on 3 different systems. Actually, I've bought it on Xbox 360 twice, on PS3 once, and on PC once. And I've never gotten more than 2 hours into it.
I did buy it for PS3. I found it cheap for like $8 or something.
Oh yeah.
But I've attempted to play it 0 times, mostly because of the some of the negative attention surrounding it, and also because I'm just always busy with some game or another. Well, yeah, I'm trying to beat the Fist of the North Star PS4 game before the end of the year, so I'll be wedging that. I'll be wedging that around rounds of Pokemon and Ghost Trick in December. But, yeah, okay, and this almost feels like a Random Encounter episode now. But, listeners, you can reach us by emailing retro@rpgfan.com is the best way, and also those other facets of rpgfan.com that we mentioned a little while ago. But, Joe, if a listener would want to reach you directly, what would be the best way for them to do so?
So, if you want to reach me, you can do that on Twitter or Instagram or Discord as @QueersForFears. And as we also said, if you're commenting on RPG Fans' posts or anything, you're probably talking to me.
Right on. And listeners, if you want to reach me directly, I am always the person responding to messages from retro@rpgfan.com, so there's that email. And also, you can find me on Twitter as @TheRealMonsoon most of the time, @EvokerForDogs other times, or Monsoon Mike on Discord. Joe, thank you so much for playing Vagrant Story and then being interrogated about it by me.
I'm glad to be interrogated.
Oh my, okay.
Well, wait.
I'm sorry. I'm not going to edit that out. You just made a move with your risk meter too high.
Oh boy.
Thank you. Good night and good luck.